Stock trades placed by politicians are often tracked by investors because they believe politicians must know something we don't. And well, sometimes they do. One such politician traders are particularly interested in is Mark Green. Mark Green is a representative for Tennessee's 7th Congressional District. He's a Republican who openly supports independence from foreign oil sources. And to no surprise, he's currently invested in an American energy company named NGL ENERGY Partners LP, stock ticker NGL. NGL is a diversified midstream MLP that provides multiple services to producers and end users in the oil industry. If you're not familiar, the midstream process is between the upstream and downstream processes of oil and gas products. Once the exploration and extraction of raw materials from the ground have been completed, Midstream Works takes the raw oil and separates the natural gas components, and the oil out. This process results in water being produced. The water is either recycled or disposed of. The natural gas and oil are stored until they are transported to refineries where the crude oil and natural gas can be refined into a variety of products which are then sold to consumers. As I mentioned earlier, NGL is an MLP, which stands for Master Limited Partnership. MLPs can operate in various industries, but they are most commonly associated with the energy sector, particularly in midstream activities. MLP investors are referred to as unit holders. MLPs do not pay federal income taxes at the entity level. Instead, individual unit holders are then responsible for reporting their share of the MLP's income on their individual tax returns. However, MLP units are publicly traded on securities exchanges, providing liquidity for investors. Back to Mark Green, what some find interesting about his investment in NGL is that he also recently voted yes on the Energy and Water Development and Related Agencies Appropriations Act 2024. Before anyone gets too excited, I do want to let you know that an Appropriations Act is a piece of legislation that authorizes the government to spend money. It is a crucial component of the budget process in many countries, including the United States. The Appropriations Act specifies the amount of money allocated to various government agencies and programs, outlining how funds should be spent during a specific fiscal year. In other words, this is a pretty standard bill. I do want to mention that the US has extracted historic amounts of domestic oil. Upstream processes tend to reap the most profits. However, if we are producing more oil, that could create more demand for US midstream companies. It's difficult to explicitly state whether or not this Appropriations Act will directly benefit NGL. I don't have access to their full client list. Additionally, I don't see any of NGL's operating basins mentioned on their website included in the appropriations bill. NGL's main source of income currently comes from their water solutions processes. The water solutions segment transports, treats, recycles, and disposes of produced and backflow water generated for oil and natural gas production. If this bill provides upstream processes with funding for water treatment, there could be a trickle-down effect in demand for midstream companies that specialize in water treatment. And now for the burning question. If Mark Green is buying NGL, should you?
So how's your portfolio looking? Bet it's not looking as good as members of Congress. Let's take a look back at 2023's best performing stock pickers in Congress. Sitting in at number 2, Republican Congressman Mark Green from Tennessee, who was up 122% this year.
Well, first of all, as tempting as it can be, I wouldn't buy a stock just because a politician bought it. Remember, they can be wrong too. I also don't have any proof that he's insider trading. He could just be putting his money where his mouth is, and speculators are buying it up because Mark Green sits on some very powerful boards, including the Committee of Foreign Affairs and Homeland Security. What we do have is the fundamentals, and we can see if we're comfortable with the risks of investing. PE is negative, which means this stock has negative earnings. PS is around average, meaning the stock is slightly more expensive than usual with this metric alone. Revenue, operating income, and net income have been on the rise for the last 3 years. However, net income is still in the red. Net margin is negative 0.8%. It has improved over the last 3 years, and hopefully that trend continues into positive territory. The debt to asset ratio is not too bad. Cash and assets have declined. However, debt has also declined 15%. According to their last earnings report, NGL is committed to managing and paying off debt. yet. NGL has climbed almost 40% in the last 6 months and is currently sitting above the average analyst price target. However, according to capitaltrades.com, Mark Green does still appear to own NGL, so maybe he sees more potential or knows something we don't. That said, if the stock rips when he buys it, it could trigger a sell-off if he sells. Also, it should be noted that politicians have up to 45 days to disclose their transactions. If I was buying today's prices, I might be able to squeeze a trade up to 590 or 620 in the short term, but my upside targets are a lot higher than my downside targets. Once I start seeing that, it's not worth the risk for me. Maybe a day trade on good volume. I'd rather buy it under 450. Even then, there is a lot of downside potential. I could see myself going long at 375. However, Mark Green's last purchase price was 417. On a side note, a lot of long-term investors I personally know don't like investing in oil and gas because they believe it's a dying industry. I don't think oil and gas is going to completely disappear anytime soon. I think there's still plenty of money to be made in the industry. In terms of 30 plus years from now, if you're funding your retirement account with the energy sector, I think it's smart to diversify in both renewables and fossil fuel. Well, that's all for today. Shout out to Jared for suggesting today's video. If you have a stock you'd like me to cover next, leave a comment and let me know your thoughts on NGL. If you made it this far in the video, science says you'll probably like my other videos. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.